What is the ranking of the calamities, and what can they do to the world? Who represents being the most dangerous among all of them? Beings with immense powers can cause enormous damage to the whole world. And furthermore, we are going to mention each of these powers in their rarest effect. Prepared? I believe so. I already ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and activate the bell. The Dark Continent is a forbidden whisper in the universe of Hunter x Hunter, a limit where human reason meets its own extinction, reflected in creatures and phenomena that surpass any known parameter. There, the rules do not obey the natural instincts of humans or even the balance of none. There, entities reign that defy the concepts of time, life, death, and even sanity. The calamities that emerged from it are scarce records, protected by iron and blood by the world governments, not out of zeal, but out of fear, an ancient fear, which made the world create a silent treaty, the treaty for the preservation of humanity, to never return to that land that promised everything, but delivered the abyss. 5 calamities were officially described: Ai, Brian, Papu, Zobai, and Hellbell, and each of them, in their own way, represents a grotesque distortion of an essential aspect of life. These creatures are not traditional monsters. They don't roar to scare. They don't shine to impress. They exist to devour what sustains the human world. Its sanity, its structure, its desire, its hunger, its identity. And that is precisely why one can risk making a classification, not by their forms or immediate destructions, but by their symbolic depth and by the degree of ruin they can impose on the world. It is something that, even when placed in some kind of ranking, can easily change depending on the situation itself. And we cannot only rely on this information. There is much more that the eyes cannot see, and indeed, each one has its effect regardless of what it may be. At the base of this scale, even though it is not something weak, is Ai, the calamity of obsessive love. The entity, barely described but suggested as a being that pursues and possesses, represents corrupted affection, the suffocating surrender, the passion that devours. Ai does not destroy cities with brute force, but destructures communities with its emotional manipulations. If it spread across the world, humanity would be taken over by a force that masks its cruelty with affection. People would stop acting by logic or instinct and would begin to consume themselves in sick relationships. A love that imprisons, that demands totality, that eliminates the other as an individual. Its impact is psychological, social, but not immediate. And for this reason, it occupies a relatively lower position in terms of destruction, although its symbolic potential is terrifying. Its strength lies in persistence and emotional poison more than in physical power. Above Ai is positioned Papu, the calamity of eternal hunger. Described as a creature whose appetite can never be satisfied, Papu consumes not only matter, but everything that represents abundance. Food, resources, even emotions. Papu, if released into the world, would devastate food chains, ecological systems, but also human relationships. Hunger, as a symbol, goes far beyond the absence of food. It is the absence of meaning, of satisfaction, of fulfillment. A society dominated by Papu would never find rest, sleep, or balance. Everyone would always be hungry for something that will never come. However, Papu, although causing large-scale damage, is still a natural threat to a certain degree. It represents an uncontrollable force of biology, a mutation, a need taken to the extreme. And for this reason, despite its prolonged terror, it does not destabilize the world with the same speed or depth as other calamities. In the intermediate zone, between the devastating and the apocalyptic, is Brian, the protector who kills, the weapon that turns against everything it sees as a threat. Brian is presented as a guardian of some disappeared culture, and it is suggested that he is a living artificial structure, programmed to defend, but which has lost discernment about what truly represents danger. Brian is a nightmare, because his violence is automatic and disproportionate. He does not attack with anger or fear. He attacks with programmed conviction. If Brian touched the soil of the human world, no military force would be enough to stop him. He would react to any approach as an invasion and use his monumental strength to annihilate everything. His threat is immediate, physical, and hardly negotiable. But he still responds to specific triggers. And for that reason, it is possible to think, even with great difficulty, of ways to contain him, which places him below the 2 remaining calamities. Zobai occupies one of the highest positions for a very simple reason. He does not destroy bodies, he destroys concepts. The plague of ideas, as it is known, is an entity that contaminates civilizations with new thoughts that corrode the foundations of the old. Zobai, if left to circulate freely, would not need to lift a single claw. It would be enough for its ideas to be heard. From that point on, the collapse would happen in silence. Cultures would be undone. Institutions would fall into ruin. Centuries-old beliefs would fall apart. All of this not by force, but by doubt. The doubt that disorganizes, that questions, that undermines. Zobai is the calamity that comes closest to what defines man, language, thought, symbol. And for that reason, perhaps, it is the most difficult to stop, because it cannot be fought with weapons, not even with none. Its battlefield is the mind, and there is no defense against the contamination of doubt. At the top of the scale, where the unnameable horrors reside, is Hellbell, the serpent of screams, the entity that personifies psychic collapse. Hellbell does not act with physical destruction or symbolic hunger. It operates at the edge of sanity. It is described as something that devours reason, that plunges its victims into a trance of perpetual madness. Where Hellbell passes, there are no bodies left, no ruins, only shattered consciousnesses. Its danger is absolute because it nullifies any rational reaction. None, strategies, alliances, everything disappears in the face of total loss of self. Facing Hellbell is like looking into the void itself and not returning. Its presence does not need to be seen, heard, or even perceived. It just needs to exist. The mere idea of its approach is enough to compromise the emotional structure of a nation. It is an existential weapon, and for that reason, in an impact analysis, it is the most dangerous of all. The end of the human world would begin with silence, and then with screams. However, this scale, although functional, begins to collapse when we introduce other variables, especially when we think of figures like Nanaka, the entity that resides within a Luka-Zoldyck. Nanaka is not an officially described calamity, but everything about her points to something that aligns with, or even surpasses, the standard of the 5 recognized ones. Her power is one of granting. She fulfills wishes, but charges a price that intensifies in proportion to the previous wish. This mechanism resembles a cosmic pact, an entity that moves according to laws that humans do not understand. In essence, she is a living contract, a distortion of causality. And the most disturbing thing is that her morality is neutral. Nanaka does not desire evil, but she executes it if necessary. She does not protect, but fulfills. The problem is not in her, but in who uses her. If Nanaka were to fall into the wrong hands, and the world is full of wrong hands, she would become the ultimate weapon, more powerful than all the calamities combined, because she would combine the malleability of human desires with the cosmic indifference of granting. She would make the impossible happen, and then charge the price with lives, sanities, entire structures. Her danger lies precisely in seeming tame, usable, a calamity that smiles and asks for affection. But her nature is far beyond human comprehension. And for that reason, even without a title, Nanaka may be the most hidden and lethal of all calamities. But this leads us to the final question. What if some of the most emblematic figures in human history in Hunter x Hunter also carry within them the DNA of these calamities? What if the work is telling us, between the lines, that the real terror is not beyond the sea, but within people? In this interpretation, characters like Jing Freaks, with his obsession to explore the unknown, represent the hunger of Papu. Paris Dunhill, with his desire to sow political chaos, evokes the thinking of Zobai. And, more clearly, Gon Freaks, by giving everything of himself to destroy Neferpitou, comes close to the madness of Hellbell. He gives up logic, morality, life, and transforms. Maybe the Dark Continent isn't outside, but inside. The boundary that separates the calamities from the human world was never the ocean. It has always been consciousness. And if this barrier continues to break, more and more fragments of that other side will begin to appear among men, not in the form of monsters, but of feelings, ideas, impulses. The love that devours, the defense that kills, the hunger that never ceases, the word that dissolves, the scream that drives mad. And for that very reason, the classification of the calamities does not serve only to measure power. It serves as a mirror. Each of them is a distorted reflection of what exists in us. And maybe in the end, the worst of all is precisely the one we cannot point to as other, because it already lives within us. The calamity that lives in silence and reveals itself when the world is most vulnerable. The one that doesn't need to cross seas, because it already inhabits our dreams, our decisions, our history. In the Dark Continent, the calamities are real, but in the human world, they are inevitable.